Hey everybody, this is Pastor Andy Duffey from Antioch Church of the Brethren, and I am bringing you your first daily devotional after Easter. And I'm out here in the backyard. It's a beautiful day out. It's been raining, things are blooming. The dogwood tree over there is just looking beautiful and white. It's just great. It's perfect for Easter, right? Because Easter brings these connotations of spring, and you may have noticed my face is a little more open, and the tomb of hair has been rolled back, and I just feel so much more comfortable with a bare face. I thought this week we might look at the passages that have to do with the resurrection. Easter was yesterday. This is Monday. You're probably looking at this on Tuesday. But it's interesting how each of the four Gospels tells the story in some different ways, and there's some interesting things to do with that. And Pastor Bilbo's with me. Bilbo, come over here. Come here. All right, maybe he'll come when he feels like it, and he can share some insight. So I wanted to read for you from the earliest Gospel, which most think is the Gospel of Mark. It's the shortest Gospel. And its Easter story is particularly interesting. You may or may not know that there are actually multiple endings to the Gospel of Mark. There's the original ending, which is much shorter, and then at some point, scribes who were copying the letter decided, well, this isn't enough. We need to add a little bit to this to make it end the way we want it to. So I'll talk about that when we get to it. But this is how the original ending of Mark goes in Mark chapter 16. You might see Pastor Bilbo behind me, right? But yeah, okay, you can barely see him. When the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome brought spices so that they might go to anoint Jesus' body. Very early on the first day of the week, just after sunrise, they were on their way to the tomb, and they asked each other, "Who will roll away the stone from the entrance of the tomb?" When they looked up, they saw that the stone, which was very large, had been rolled away. As they entered the tomb, they saw a young man dressed in a white robe sitting on the right side, and they were alarmed. "Don't be alarmed," he said. "You are looking for Jesus the Nazarene who was crucified. He has risen. He is not here. See the place where they laid him. But go, tell his disciples and Peter, he is going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him just as he told you." Trembling and bewildered, the women went out and fled from the tomb. They said nothing to anyone because they were afraid. The end. That is the first ending of the Gospel of Mark. And it's such a happy ending, right? Trembling and bewildered, they said nothing because they were afraid. That's how Mark's Gospel, the original Gospel, ends with fear, with no one hearing this news. Now, we know, and I'm certain the earliest audiences reading Mark knew, well, they had to tell somebody or the church wouldn't be here today, and that's exactly right. But Mark chose to end his gospel, his account of the life of Jesus, with this note of mystery, possibility, even a little bit of uncertainty. I wonder if he's intending for us as the audience, and for his earliest audiences, to consider themselves. If they're calling themselves disciples of Jesus, are they going to be too afraid to live out the message, the gospel that Jesus has presented for us? Are we going to be too afraid to invite others to follow this way of self-giving love? Are we going to proclaim that Jesus is alive, that his Spirit lives in us and guides us? Or are we going to be like these women and not say anything to anyone? It's kind of up to us, right? We are the rest of Mark's Gospel. We are the conclusion. If we want Mark's Gospel to have a happy ending, it's up to us to kind of live that out for ourselves in our own lives. I think that's a creative way to end a gospel. Now, at some point, early Christians read this ending of Mark and they said, this is no way to end a story. You don't end a story about good news with, they went away scared and said nothing to anybody. That's not a great way to end a story. Bilbo agrees. He's saying all kinds of things to people, right? I don't know if it's good news or not, but he's proclaiming. So at some point they added Mark 16 verses 9 through the end. And if you have your own Bibles, you can look for yourselves. In some versions, they're in italics, and there may be a footnote or a little divide after verse 8 that says, for instance, in the NIV, it says, the earliest manuscripts and some other ancient witnesses do not have verses 9 through 20. And what appears in those verses? What did the early Christians decide, well, we needed to add to the story? They added things as kind of a summary of what appears in the other Gospels. Because the other three Gospels, Matthew, Luke, and John, include lots of other stories that we may be more familiar with from the Easter narrative. So we get in here Jesus appearing to Mary Magdalene in person. We get Jesus appearing several times to other disciples, specifically two on the road. And if you hear our worship service this coming Sunday, you'll hear more about that episode. There is Jesus giving a kind of great commission, kind of a, here is what you're going to do, disciples. If you're going to do what I did, go out. And Mark's version says, go into all the world and preach the gospel to all creation. Whoever believes and is baptized will be saved. Whoever does not believe will be condemned. And then we get something that doesn't appear in any of the other biblical gospels, which says, Jesus says, these signs will accompany those who believe. In my name they will drive out demons, they will speak in new tongues, they will pick up snakes with their hands, and when they drink deadly poison, it will not hurt them at all. They will place their hands on sick people and they will get well. So we've got these miraculous signs, right? These are things that even today, Christians aren't really practicing so much. We do get some Christian groups that talk about active exorcisms of demons, speaking in tongues, handling snakes even, in certain pockets. I don't know of folks that drink deadly poison, but I might just be unfamiliar with that. But these are things that only appear in this extended ending to Mark's Gospel that wasn't included in the original. Fascinating things. And then, of course, there's a summary of Jesus' ascension. He goes back into heaven and leaves the disciples to continue the work and grow the church and proclaim the news. Now, in the world of today, I think Mark's original ending is the one I want to stick with. If I want to know about the other events, I can read the other Gospels, but there's something special about Mark. Something about needing to live into the ending ourselves. Jesus, the risen Jesus, doesn't appear in the end of Mark. There's just an empty tomb and a possibility. How can you finish the story for yourself? Can you proclaim the news to someone? The news that the women in this gospel were too afraid to share? Can you extend love to someone who might need it? Can you appreciate new creation all around, even in the time of quarantine and coronavirus? The kingdom of heaven is here. If we believe the Easter story, if we believe the resurrection is real, then God has already brought the kingdom to earth in some way. Maybe not completely, but it's already here, especially for those who live into the kingdom even now, by faith, by love, by extending those to others. So there's your challenge for the beginning of this bright week, this Easter week. How can you live into the story? And how can you finish Mark's Gospel? I'll see you later. Bye.